Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to share with you today. My name is Chris Shea. I'm an instructor at Arkansas Tech University, and I initiated this research towards completion of my PhD at Oklahoma State. The opportunity came to me thanks to Dr. Haley Murphy at OSU, who had surveyed firefighters for a pilot study on diversity commissioned by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. This blind data had not been fully explored, but there were questions which had been asked about a topic that I was interested in, leadership in the fire service, specifically because I also am a volunteer firefighter. So I determined to look at what that data had to say, specifically looking at transformational leadership. Previous studies on transformational leadership in the fire service have been done, specifically Lowe in 2000, Allen 2010, and Shin 2013. These studies indicate that volunteer fire departments are more likely than professional departments to have transformational leaders, and that transformational leadership has a positive correlation with organizational commitment. Since the data available to me included both volunteer departments and combination departments, I wanted to see if there was a distinction between these two types of departments in leadership style and in organizational commitment. It's interesting to know that 80% of fire departments in the United States are either fully volunteer or are a combination of paid and volunteer firefighters. And combination departments usually are the outcome of decreased volunteerism. As the number of volunteers goes down, the need to provide consistent service requires paying some of the firefighters, usually officers, to be on duty full time. Looking at the intersection of volunteerism, transformational leadership, and organizational commitment, my initial research questions were as follows. Question 1, are volunteer chiefs more likely than paid chiefs to use a transformational leadership style? And question 2, does transformational leadership have a significant impact on organizational commitment and paid services against transactional style leadership? After preliminary analysis, I realized I was missing a key component in the data, as I'll mention shortly. So instead, I considered question 3, are departments with volunteer chiefs more likely to have higher organizational commitment? The reason for this question will become evident. This line of questioning was feasible because, as part of a larger survey on diversity and inclusion, peer-reviewed tools for measuring organizational commitment and leadership were included in the questionnaire. Specifically, 8 of the questions, numbered 1 through 8 on the charts in my poster, are factors of effective commitment, validated by Allen and Meyer 1990. And questions 9 through 11 measure continuance commitment, also validated in the same article. Regarding leadership, the survey took questions from the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute Climate Survey 4.1 back in 2018. This Department of Defense tool has been updated in 2020 with a more rigorous question set on transformational leadership style, but those questions, the newer questions, were not part of the data set I had available. By comparing, however, the two Department of Defense surveys, the one that was used and the current version, and then considering the questions introduced in the Global Transformation Leadership Scale developed by Carless et al. In 2000, I selected 4 questions from the data as likely factors of transformational leadership. So my initial analysis was a linear regression of perception of transformational leadership using those aforementioned factors against expressed organizational commitment using the 11 aforementioned factors. While a positive relationship seems to exist, you can see that in the chart in the center of the poster, there's no distinction really between the responses of volunteer and paid firefighters. Those are the two separate lines. And as you can see from this chart, there's a lot of noise, a lot of potential outliers, suggesting another variable is probably at play. So I looked for that alternate variable and realized I was considering volunteer members of combination departments as volunteers, even though their leaders were actually paid. Yet I couldn't also lump them in with paid firefighters either because they were definitely volunteers. So this created the need for the third question, which distinguishes the status of the chief as the dependent variable rather than the status of the firefighter. I then ran a comparison of the means for each of these 3 service types: volunteers, combination volunteers, and combination paid firefighters. These results were much more interesting and opened up a whole new line of questioning. As you can see in the chart on the bottom left, which displays the two types of volunteers, there are a couple of factors which have noticeable variation. So these are 5 and 6, the questions which included or considered inclusion. I do not feel like part of the family at my department. I do not feel emotionally attached to this department were the Likert scale questions. And then number 8 is also noticeable, and that was considering belonging. I do not feel a strong sense of belonging to my department. So these three are all on the affective scale. Now, if we look at the chart on the right, the blue line is the same. It's the same volunteers within a combination department. But the green line is the means of paid firefighters within those same departments. As you can see, the two green lines are very similar, suggesting that the volunteers in a volunteer department and paid firefighters in a combination department are actually tracking very similarly on their opinions on continuance and effective commitment, and also on transformational leadership. But we see that the same things are consistently different, suggesting that the main source of outliers are probably volunteers within the combination departments. And again, 5, 6, and 8 are the most significant deviations, suggesting that even within a combination fire department, volunteers have a lower sense of inclusion and belonging than their paid counterparts. Now, obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg on this data. It was a relatively small sample when we start dividing into those three groups. I plan to do additional analysis using maybe some more appropriate models for the small sample. And I want to look at rank within the fire service as a variable as well, knowing that most of the paid are probably higher ranked. But this preliminary work seems to support the findings in the literature that there is a positive linear relationship between transformational leadership and organizational commitment in the fire service. But also suggests that the rising trend of combination departments across the country may have an adverse effect of making volunteers feel excluded and having lower organizational commitment, even if transformational leadership is present in their department. So just looking at the future of the fire service in the United States, I want to continue research along this vein to determine what are the likely outcomes of an increased number of combination fire departments, and how can we mitigate perhaps any trends that are verified in terms of adverse effects, a loss of inclusion and acceptance by volunteers in these departments. Of course, I'm available for any questions during regular scheduled times, and my links for contact are in the feed loop portfolio. Thanks.